Solange, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So, hello. Hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So it's definitely a very nice opportunity to share with you my thoughts on the evolving regulatory landscape, something important among others to consider when developing a new oncology product. So if you could please upload my slides, that would be
Yes,
great.
yes. Just wait for a second. I'm just sharing your slides now. So good luck. Stage is all yours now.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's now move on to the following one. The usual disclaimer. Next one.
Just a second.
Any issue on your side?
No, 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 no. Just for a second. I was just trying to make it on a full view. Just wait for a while. Okay, so yes, all right.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the following.
Okay. Yes. Great.
Okay, so as I said, the usual disclaimer. Next one. Here are the topics I will detail further in my presentation. So the regulatory framework we are used to operate in, something about complex clinical trials, pediatric oncology development, inclusion of adolescent in adult oncology trials, and a few projects that are currently ongoing within the FDA Oncology Center of Excellence, and in particular Orbis, Optimus, as well as the real-time oncology review program. Next one. Let's look at the regulatory framework. Next one. On these slides are depicted all the opportunities to interact with the regulators in Europe, as well as the processes to use to register our products and have them reaching the patients in needs, whether through expedited pathway, such as the accelerated approval, the approval under exceptional circumstances, or the approval under condition, which is, of course, something that is quite, familiar for oncology products. And also the opportunity to use early access program, whether in Europe or in the UK, even also in the US, as you know, and this is the opportunity, of course, to use our products ahead of registration. Next one. There are also established expedited pathway in the US, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the fast track designation, the breakthrough designation, the accelerated approval, or the priority review, and details of those, are included into the slides, which I guess you will be provided, at the end of this meeting. Next one. Next one. In addition to these processes, there are, of course, guidance documents that, are usually released by the regulators, and at the FDA, of course, as usual, these are always important to consider. In the US, more specifically, until July 2021, the FDA has issued 35 oncology and hematologic malignancies related guidance documents. Some are condition specific or pediatric specific. Others have a focus on methodology such as endpoints, study design to be used, or population characteristics, including preclinical development derived from ICH guideline recommendation, and in particular, the S9 and its question and answer. These documents are all about the non-clinical evaluation for anti-cancer pharmaceuticals. Finally, the 2018 guidance provide a recommendation on endpoints and clarifies how various oncology endpoints can serve different purposes. Next one. There are also a guideline in Europe. The draft guideline on the evaluation of anti-cancer medicinal products in man, released in November 2020, and which is still as a draft, addresses the most recent design in oncology, such as umbrella, basket trials, the so-called master protocols, and the emergence of indication defined in the first place by a biomarker selective for a disease sensitive to the treatment. This guideline is complemented with a series of appendices as detailed on the slide on methodological consideration for using progression-free survival or disease-free survival in confirmatory trials, also about the use of patient-reported outcomes and health-related quality of life measures in oncology studies. Also, what could be expected from the summary of product characteristic for anti-cancer medicinal products, and in particular for section 4.8, which relates to the safety of the product in the labeling, as well as a condition-specific guidance. Next one. In the end, hopefully both FDA and EMA are almost aligned, since considering overall survival as the most persuasive outcome to use in trials to demonstrate efficacy, as well as, where appropriate, alternatives to overall survival, such as progression-free survival or disease-free survival, knowing that, of course, health-related quality of life or PRO measures, such as symptom control, could also constitute clinically relevant and valid primary endpoints, and of course are also of interest when we are discussing with HTA bodies, at the time of pricing and reimbursement. Next one. In addition, interesting to note that there are some emerging endpoints. For example, the minimal residual disease response rate is known to be used as a surrogate endpoint, since helping shortening trial duration if the benefit in terms of long-term efficacy can eventually be confirmed. Indeed, the validation of MRD response rate as a surrogate endpoint requires that the treatment effect on this marker can predict quantitatively the treatment effect in terms of progression-free survival. As such, it is included in the EMA draft guideline on the use of MRD as a clinical endpoint in multiple myeloma studies. Whereas the 2018 FDA guidance focuses on the use of this endpoint for the development of drugs and biological products for the treatment of hematological malignancy, it's interesting, of course, to look at what will come next to have it, used more widely. And of course, in diseases such as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, multiple myeloma, or acute myeloid leukemia. Next one. Approval based on pathologic complete response is acceptable for high-risk early-stage breast cancer, provided supportive evidence of efficacy and safety is generated from studies conducted in the metastatic setting. Metastasis-free survival for traditional approval for a therapy in non-metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer is also something of interest. And so far, the acceptance of circulating tumor DNA testing for cancer screening or monitoring as a cancer as a prognostic biomarker remains limited. With that said, let's move on to the next slide, which is to look at complex clinical trials, which is currently a very interesting and hot topic. Next one. It has been shown that innovative clinical trial design can speed up drug development without lowering scientific and regulatory standards. This is definitely the opportunity to not only speed up drug development, but also earlier patient access to targeted therapies. Next one. In 2019, the heads of Medicines Agency Clinical Trial Facilitation Group, the CTFG, who has been used to mention complex trials as an evolution and not as a revolution, issued a recommendation paper on the initiation and conduct of complex clinical trials. They are using complex clinical trials as an overarching term. And although the Europe and US terminology differ, in fact, it covers the same type of trials. Next one. On these slides, you can see, and I'm sure you're aware of the fact that since a few years now, the FDA, which aims to select a variety of design approaches and therapeutic areas into its complex, innovative design pilot program, has been of a great interest. So far, and as detailed on the slide, 6 submissions have been accepted by the FDA within this pilot. And moving forward, FDA will continue to develop staff capacity and engage external experts, and is also planning to select up to 8 proposals per year, and also to convene a public workshop, which is also always, of interest to interact, with the FDA and to share learnings and best practices. And also for them, the opportunity to publish a draft guidance on the use of Bayesian methodology in clinical trials of drugs and biologics. Next one. So this is in fact the CID pilot program. which, as I said, has already accepted 6 submission in a variety of therapy domain. And I already mentioned, that moving forward, under PDUFA 7, the FDA is planning to even optimize this program. Next one. Also in the US, there are other, interesting initiative, and in particular, the one led by the Clinical Trial Transformation Initiative, CTTI, was provided some best practices for the use of master protocol. Included in the slide, a few links that will lead you to those interesting documents or recording, but I guess you are already fully aware, of this initiative. Next one. In Europe, among other public-private partnerships of interest, there is the EU Perl Project, which aims to create a framework for patient-centric integrated research platforms through which novel technique and treatments developed by multiple companies, organizations could be tested in a platform trial. The consortium, according to its work program, has focused on a few conditions such as major depression, tuberculosis, NASH, and neurofibromatosis. Back in 2020, they organized a stakeholder workshop which brought together around 600 experts to foster the debate on platform trials. And the project, of course, is moving forward and expected to be, finalized somewhere in 2023. And currently, we are working on organizing a follow-up workshop, which will be the opportunity to reflect on the work done so far. And this workshop will be held on November the 10th this year. Next one. Important to mention that the work done at the global level through ICH, which is quite important since our products are usually developed for global purposes. Interesting to see that it took more than 10 years after some great discussion between the European Trade Association, FPA, and the European Medicines Agency, EMA, on adaptive design, to a discussion which has also involved the FDA at that time, to see that the topic has now reached ICH since there is now an expert work group that is currently drafting a guideline, the so-called E20 guideline. Similarly, on a somewhat similar topic, I would say, at least important, to optimize drug development, modeling and simulation, or model-informed drug development, MIDD, has reached also ICH. And in addition to a guidance on MIDD principles, we expect in the future a revision of the existing E4 guideline. So indeed, something quite interesting to look at in the future. Next one. To finish off with this topic, I'm pleased to share with you the report of a multi-stakeholder workshop on complex trial design we organized last year. and for which follow-up activities are currently being considered. So I added a link so that you can look at the slides that were used at that meeting, a meeting that also involved the FDA colleagues and patient representative, and for which a report has been released. Next one. Let's now focus on pediatric oncology drug development. So pediatric development is quite close to my heart, although not a pediatrician, since I was used in the past to work as a physician at the hospital, but not in pediatrics. But it's nice to learn. It's nice to evolve. And next one. A lot is happening, and of course, this is something which we have to consider. Knowing, of course, the legislative framework. Pediatric oncology drug development has been somewhat enhanced with the release of the US Race for Children Act, which has been effective since August 2020. This act was released to optimize the development of oncology products for children and avoid too many waivers. And the RACE Act requires, as you know, for sure, companies that are developing targeted cancer drug for adults to develop pediatric study plan for those drugs in children with cancer when the molecular targets of the cancer drugs are substantially relevant to children's cancer. In addition, the Race for Children Act ends an exemption from Pediatric Research Equity Act, PREAC, requirements for cancer drugs that have an orphan status. So these are, of course, important changes happening in the US. However, next one. Next one, please. The RACE Act has undoubtedly global impact, and in particular in regions such as Europe, where there is also a pediatric legislation. Although similar in intent, regulatory requirements differ between Europe and the US, where pediatric investigation plan and pediatric study plan differ in content somewhat, sometimes, and in timing of submission as well. However, regulators are conscious that regulatory alignment is critical to accelerate cancer drug development for children, and this is why they are calling for simultaneous submission of PIP and IPSP. And in addition, they recently issued a common commentary template to help sponsors developing in parallel their pediatric investigation plan and IPSP. And I added, on the slide, also the publication that, were authored by both FDA and EMA regulators. Next one. Another important topic to consider in pediatric oncology drug development is the inclusion of adolescent in adult oncology clinical trials. Next one. To this effect, it's quite interesting to see that in 2019, the FDA issued a guidance document providing details on appropriate criteria for the inclusion of adolescent patients in adult oncology clinical trials at various stages of drug development. Also on dosing and PK/PD evaluation, on safety monitoring and ethical consideration. Of interest, there's also the Accelerate FAIR initiative, Fostering Age Inclusion Research Initiative, which is used to offer a FAIR stamp for trials which actively avoid unnecessary barriers based on age. And this initiative also provide a toolkit to facilitate the conduct of such trials, such as, this toolkit is including assent templates for adolescents, and also a list of clinical sites where, it is quite possible to have, a trial be performed, and including adolescent and adult at the same time. And of course, we know that including adolescent in adult trials can, pose some operational challenges. So this is why it's always interesting to identify where, to perform those trials. And finally, important to mention the interest, the value of the pediatric strategy fora that are, being organized by Accelerate. They have been shown to be quite valuable since bringing all the stakeholders, including the regulators, together to discuss drugs that are worth developing in a given condition. Next one. Let's now look at some program that the FDA Oncology Center of Excellence has established. Next one. So the first one, Project Orbis, which was launched in May 2019, provides a framework for concurrent submission and review of oncology products among international partners through a confidentiality agreement. Currently, within this project, there are 7 participating agencies, so namely Switzerland, Australia, Singapore, Canada, the UK, Israel, and Brazil. Orbis is not at all a work-sharing initiative, since each agency conducts its own review process, and each Orbis partner can rely also on the verification of the results that FDA conducts as part of its review. However, at the end of the day, each Orbis partner retains full independence and regulatory decision and labeling negotiation. This is, of course, quite important to consider and to understand. Next one. Last year, at the opportunity of a ground round organized by the FDA, we had the opportunity to hear from the FDA progress made by Project Orbis. And I have included, on the slide, a link to this webinar organized last year. They were saying that in total, in a year time, they had the opportunity to review 60 applications. And in addition, these, of course, have been quite, well integrated with other FDA program, as mentioned here on the slide. knowing that you probably know that the European Medicines Agency is not part, of this project, since, of course, knowing the timelines in use in Europe, it would be quite impossible for them, to participate and to be able, to join the review process. Next one. This meeting was the opportunity as well for the OBIS partner to discuss what could be, a future direction for their coordinated work. And they were saying that, well, whether it could be possible to expand, this project to other application, meaning beyond oncology indication, and whether it could be also possible to attract other countries. Next one. Another project, Project Optimus, was recently established to reform the dose optimization selection paradigm in oncology drug development, meaning that at least 2 dose level to support dosing decision would need to be assessed. It has been acknowledged indeed that fewer dose finding investigation are traditionally conducted in early clinical development in oncology compared to other therapeutic domain, and that oncology dose finding studies are primarily focusing on identifying the maximum tolerated dose. With this project, FDA-specific goals include the need to communicate expectation for dose finding and dose optimization through guidance, public workshop, and other, interaction. Of course, it's always important to remember that when developing the strategy of our oncology product, we should remember that the FDA, as any other, regulatory agency, and in particular in Europe, they are encouraging drug developers to meet with them early in drug development, and of course, well before conducting trials, and in particular confirmatory trials that are intended for registration. And of course, such discussion with the Oncology Review Division will be helpful to discuss dose finding and dose optimization strategies. Next one. This one, the Real-Time Oncology Review Program, is something that is aimed at facilitating earlier submission of top-line results and data sets to support an earlier start to FDA review. This is indeed the opportunity to provide a more efficient review process to ensure that safe and effective treatments are available to patients as early as possible, while improving review quality and engaging in early iterative communication with the applicant. Not surprisingly, there are some eligibility criteria to consider as detailed on the slide. And so far, from February 2018 through 2021, 65 oncology applications were reviewed and approved under this program. So this is quite interesting, and in a way somewhat similar to what has been put in place, in Europe by the European Medicines Agency for COVID-19 related product. Next one. Prior to concluding, let me share with you my company's ambition, zero carbon, and in particular when performing clinical trials. Our objective at AstraZeneca is indeed to reduce carbon dioxide in clinical trials. So far, health authorities' position and our guidelines have not emerged. However, we welcome opportunity to engage in conversation with stakeholders. And this is why, I'm sharing with you these details, this initiative, since if interested, please don't hesitate to contact my colleague whose details, are included in the slide. Next one. And final one. To conclude, it's quite interesting to see that the way patients are diagnosed, treated, and monitored has changed with advances in new technologies, with the use of complex trials, real-world data, registries, or digital health technologies. The future is there already, and let's use all these new tools, methods, and approaches as appropriate to be better at delivering products for the benefits of patients. Also, we shouldn't hesitate to interact with the regulators who are more than ever used to collaborate among themselves, as shown by their interaction because and during the pandemic. Thank you. And I'm glad to take any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solange, for your wonderful presentation, and it was really very interesting. I hope everybody have enjoyed your session, and thank you so much for your time. I'll ask the audience that if they're having any questions, they can ask you in the chat or in the QA session. Thank you so
Sure.
much for being here and adding value in our event.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.